Alright, welcome back to another video. Today, I'm going to be talking about why this 2008 Ford Crown Victoria is my favorite car ever. If you've seen any of my other videos, you may have seen the recent video I did on my 2002 Ford Crown Victoria and why it's probably one of the best cars ever made. If you haven't checked out that video, there'll be a link to it in the description. In that video, I made a pretty bold claim that it was probably the best car ever made. Fast forward a couple months, I stumbled across this car here. This is a 2008 Crown Victoria Police Interceptor with the street appearance package. Now, in my last video, I said that it was probably better to buy a civilian Crown Victoria instead of a former police car due to the fact that they're usually not ragged on as hard if grandma's driving it versus if it's been used in police service. So no one is going to dispute the fact that the Police Interceptor, new for new, is a better vehicle. It's got better tires, better wheels, aluminum drive shaft for faster speed. It's got more auxiliary coolers for the engine, the transmission, the power steering. It's got a better computer tune, calibrated for more horsepower and torque, dual exhausts. The list goes on and on. The problem that you run into usually buying a used police car, especially nowadays, these Crown Vics are getting harder and harder to find, and every year they get older and older since they stopped making them in 2011. And believe it or not, a few years ago you could pick one of these up for around $1,000, but now it's starting to go back the other direction with the price. If you want to find a nice model, you're going to have to pay. So why would I buy this car after I just bought a 2002 and said that I wouldn't want a police interceptor because of how it's been beat? Well, this one here was owned by a large agency, a large state agency, and it was used for commuting across the state. It does have 160,000 miles on it, believe it or not, but it never had a cage. It was never a marked vehicle. And it only has 1,000 idle hours. And when we talk about idle hours, that is a better indication of the wear and tear that these cars go through. So in 2006, they started putting an idle hour meter in the instrument cluster. And on these models, 2006 to 11, you could see the idle hours, which is how long the car has just sat running and wasn't actually being driven down the road. In my case, this car had only 1,000 idle hours on it, and most patrol cars that you see with far less mileage have closer to 5,000 or 6,000 idle hours. So there's a lot more wear and tear on the engine. So these cars could be bought optioned however the department or agency that bought them wanted them to be optioned. In my case, I said street appearance package. So what exactly does that mean? Well, that means, as you can see, it doesn't have the black trim. It's got all chrome trim. It doesn't say Police Interceptor. It says Crown Victoria. So on the outside, it looks like your run-of-the-mill grandpa Crown Victoria, except for the fact that the regular Crown Victorias never came with 17-inch wheels with these hubcaps. So it has the chrome grille, and the interior, you had slightly more options. You could either get the interior with a cloth, regular bench seat, like you see in a regular civilian model Crown Vic, or you could get it like this. This is kind of a rare color on the Crown Vics, the medium stone interior. It's like a tan and gray. And I have added a aftermarket console. As you can see, a lot of people who buy these cars buy those plastic ones that you can get at Walmart or online. I wasn't really a fan of those. They don't really fit that well. So I found this one right here. It's pretty nice. You can even put a cooler in it. It's got room for CDs or whatever else. Coins, beverage holder, and it wedges in between the seats nicely without any mounting hardware. I'll put a link in the description below where you can buy that if you'd like to have the same console, but I think it looks pretty good. It's designed for a Jeep, but fits nicely in a Crown Vic here. So why the street appearance package model? Why would I want that? Well, it's kind of the best of both worlds when you think about it. You have the looks of a regular Crown Vic, which is what I'm going for, because I am not trying to look like the Popo, unlike some of you probably are. In fact, that's the last thing I want to do. I just want to enjoy my ride in one of the best cars ever made. The only signs that this ever was a police car is one plug on the roof and one plug on the trunk, and this bracket that's used to hold lights in the back window. That's a part of the car. When you think about it, these really are the last true muscle car. A full body on frame, rigid chassis with a V8 engine, basically a V8 engine truck transmission strapped into a car. You can see some of the things that differentiates this police interceptor from the civilian model. We have our high output alternator, and it has a clutch on the front, and a lot of times when you hear these things going down the road really hard, you'll hear that whine under the hood, almost sounds like a supercharger. It's actually the clutch on the alternator. Ford basically made their own version of a cold air intake system. It doesn't have any of the baffling that the civilian model cars have, and it has a much larger opening up here at the front. Also, it has an oil cooler down on the front of the radiator. So with a little bit of care and maintenance, this car will go on to live a much longer life. There are some problems though with these cars, some common problems. The first one is they're known to leak coolant and crack on the manifolds. They used to be, in the 90s, they were all plastic, and those had a lot of problems. Then they changed to an aluminum crossover, and it fixed a lot of problems, but they're still prone to that. So if you're any kind of a DIY person, that's something you can replace yourself without too much trouble. These cars, another major problem that happens on some of them, they're known to have transmission front pump failures, which requires an overhaul of the transmission. So hope that you're not one of those people that has that issue. Sometimes the cooling fan, it's electric, it goes bad. Your car may start to overheat. If you're sitting there running the AC, it may start to blow hot air. It's a good sign that your cooling fan has stopped working. Pretty easy to replace. Just remove this coolant bottle, a couple screws, and it's out. All the Ford modular motors, especially the 4.62 valves, were known to have random coil failures, which are these here. They start going bad, you may get a misfire. Your spark plugs go bad, you may get a misfire. All of the 2-valve 4.6 liters had an occasional problem where they could blow out a spark plug if they were not torqued properly. That's kind of a rare situation, and there's easy ways to avoid that. Also, the steering shafts on these cars, especially in northern climates where they come out under the intake and go into the steering, the rack and pinion in this case, or the steering box, were known to corrode and rust and break. And I've actually seen one of these cars where it broke completely and the steering wheel was just free spinning. So obviously that's a serious risk. There was a recall issued on that Ford addressed and replaced them. All right, so moving on to the inside. This is 2008. So there's slight design changes that took place in 2006. And then the last couple of years of Crown Vics had some slight changes with the switches. They changed to a switch that you had to pull up to pull the windows up. And those were due to federal safety requirements. That way your dog basically couldn't, or your child couldn't hit a switch and roll the window up on their neck. That's why those were changed. If we get behind the wheel, we can see we had, in 2006, they added a tachometer on the instrument cluster, which made for kind of a neat look that the Crown Vic never had before. It's always just a single speedometer. Also, you see this is certified calibration. It's another way to know that you're in your police car. It's very easy to swap out the dummy radio in these cars that they come with for something a little bit nicer. I just happen to have this 6-disc changer Ford stock radio lying around with a set of the radio removal tools. I had it changed out in just a couple minutes. Another feature found on only some of the police cars was this Ford fire suppression system. And Ford had some issues with a few of these cars being rear-ended in high-speed collisions on the highway, and where the gas tank would rupture because it's between the rear axle and the rear seat. So they installed this fire suppression system that actually will deploy if the car is rear-ended automatically. And if it doesn't deploy, there's this override switch that you can press, or if you punch this really hard, it will set the system off. And there's basically nozzles under the rear axle that completely saturate the bottom up under the back of the car with the fire suppression chemical. You don't know how bad I want to press this, but we don't want to press that. It is integrated into the communications network in the car, and honestly, this is just another thing to break and trigger a light on your dashboard, just like your TPMS system. So on the inside, it does look a little more like a regular police interceptor, but you, like I said, you could get the street appearance package models with the completely civilian looking interior. The only thing that would be different is that it would not have the wood grain on the dashboard. It's a really easy way to tell. So the best part about these cars, in my opinion, is the engine. We have our regular key with no PAT system on the fleet vehicles. So the 2002 Crown Victoria that I had was physically a nicer vehicle than this car. It was in better overall condition, had less wear and tear. It only had 73,000 original miles on it, and it was owned by an elderly person. But once I got behind the seat of this car and took it for a drive, I was sold, and there was no turning back. Like I said in my first video, if you've never had a 2003 and up Crown Vic, you don't know what you're missing. But once you've had a 2003 or driven a 2003 and up Crown Vic with the revised suspension, it's hard to go backwards. In 2003, they changed to a coilover front suspension with rack and pinion steering, and they did away with the old recirculating ball system. They also changed the rear suspension slightly by moving the shocks outward. The whole axle was widened as well. It gave the car a more planted feel and a much better handling and steering response. Driving a late model platform vehicle truly is an exciting experience. Again, the Crown Victoria is not the most powerful, and you probably won't be winning many races, but the overall experience is great for the driver. It's a very simple car with ample amount of torque and power. Parts for these cars are plentiful. It shares the same drivetrain with the F2 or F-150 trucks and other V8 platform vehicles that Ford made. So parts are plentiful at most parts stores. The used part market is still in great shape. There were so many of these police cars that the junkyards were full of them. So you can get hard to get parts rather easily still. As far as aesthetics, you can pick up new headlights, grills, all Ford OEM parts, rather cheap from Ford dealers. Ford usually continues support for cars for at least 10 years, and since the last one was made in 2011, you still can buy most parts brand new from Ford. So if you want to do upgrades, like I did in some of my other videos where I added cruise control, you can do that. And there'll be links to that video below as well. I also added factory keyless entry. So one thing that the Crown Vics do not come with, and their police interceptors usually, is they don't come with keyless entry because when they have a fleet option. Some of the street appearance package models, you could get keyless entry on them. Started in 2008. They all had the same driver's door module, which is located behind the panel here. So adding keyless entry was just as simple as turning it on in the computer and then programming a fob to the car. The only thing that didn't work, that was not as simple, was to get the trunk to pop. But again, just a very short procedure and one little jumper wire in the door, and then you had full working factory keyless entry. On the pre-2008 cars, we'll say anything pre like 1998 to 2003, it was as easy as replacing the driver's door module with one from a civilian car. In 2006, 2007, depending on which one you got, it may trigger a TPMS light on your dash because it's looking for TPMS and your car doesn't have it until 2008 when they got it. That's as simple as a little programming fix. Again, there's plenty of information out there on how to fix that, if that's something you're interested in doing. Buying a used police interceptor sometimes comes with some little quirks. For instance, on my car here, even though it was never used to transport prisoners and there was never a cage installed in the back, the door handles were still disabled on the inside, which didn't make much sense to me, but maybe the agency that had it was part of their standard procedures. Well, what they did is they actually cut the rods out of the doors, so the part itself is pretty easy to get from Ford for about $7 per rod, but getting them in is a whole nother challenge. But I was able to do that, and then now the back doors can be opened from the inside. You can't have a Crown Vic video without talking about the trunk, because we all know the trunk is humongous. You can fit about anything you'd ever need inside of there. So in my lifetime, I've probably owned about 10 different Crown Vics, and this one is by far my favorite out of all of them. So let's take it for a drive, and I'll show you why. So my favorite thing about this car is how it handles on the road. Doesn't feel like you're driving a big boat grandpa car. The steering wheel is very responsive. And all the low end torque of the V8 means you really rarely ever have to downshift to climb hills or accelerate past someone. Although the exhaust is quiet as a church mouse at idle, when you put the pedal to the floor, you can hear the large V8 start to come alive. Sound that's familiar to performance enthusiasts, and also I'm sure plenty of police officers enjoyed hearing that sound coming when they needed help. So this is my favorite Crown Vic that I've ever owned because it has the most power and the best handling of all of them. I've never had an 06 to 08 model before. I have had a 2003 and a 2004. Also, the looks of this car, I love the fact that it looks like my 02, just a slightly different maroon color, and yet it has all the performance goodies of the P71 Police Interceptor. If you're a Panther platform fan, be sure to subscribe to my channel because I have already put out multiple videos on this type of car, and there will be plenty more to come. If you have a comment or question, please leave it below. Like the video if you enjoyed it and you're a fan of these Panther platform cars. And until next time, We'll see you later.